I was very interested in films when I was in Kerala studying, doing my graduation and pre-degree. So I was part of film society movements in Kerala, where we used to show films around in the village, and so I got exposed to lots of those days what we call art films, and in the masters of India like Aravindan, Adur, and Satyajit and Manalsan, all these filmmakers, films, Anand Patwardhan's, all that used to be coming over there, and I got exposed to that kind of films at a very early age, in my teens actually. So that oriented me in some sense to films, and sound was something I used to do recordings a lot at home and in the surroundings, because I could get a grip of or I could put my hands on audio tape recorder at a very early stage when it was just getting introduced elsewhere in the world as a consumer product, because my father's younger brother was in Japan, and he brought a tape recorder, which nobody has seen a tape recorder that time, so and I could play around with that. So I was running around recording things, anything and everything, So with this interest and my film background, film connection through film societies, I thought it would be a great opportunity to do sound for films. And I was generally, for me to get into the film school, sound was much easier because I did graduation in physics, and which was must for those days. It was must for sound recording course in FTI. So that worked out well, and most of the people who apply for sound wouldn't really know so much about films, and particularly serious films. So I had that background, so I could, my interview and entrance to the Film Institute was an easy, very easy route for me, so I could easily get in. Yeah. My father is very much into radio and automatic record players, which keep 12 of them you keep, and they keep falling down, and one after another, and playing it, So so he was very much into, and he had many Valve radios, and he's into all that. So I think that has crept in me, and he has encouraged me a lot to join film school, and so yeah, I was exposed to sound in various formats, record players, tape recorders, and radios. Yeah, I would say at that particular point of time, I wasn't, I might not have looked at it in that particular way, probably because films were like, looked up, and so it might not have been the elaborate nature of the soundscape of these films that got me into sound. I think it's those films, got me into the film school, and which was through sound. My connection to sound was slightly detached from the films that I watch, because my sound experience in sound or experiments in sound were with these gadgets that I had at home and things like that, and I was recording things, playing around with that. But Film Institute was something else, because I had the film background, watching various films and criticizing that, and hearing symposiums and general discussions on films, So that was I would, to be honest, I might not have analyzed the soundtrack of these films that I got attracted to sound. I would say I had interest in sound, and I had interest in cinema, and I put it together, and my father encouraged me a lot to go to film school as well, because I thought it's like a rare opportunity, a rare chance, there are very few seats, and who am I, that's how I looked at it. I thought only film people who have very high caliber would go there, and I thought I don't have any of that, this is how I looked at myself. But once I given the entrance exam and all that sort, and I was called in for an orientation course, which was an experimental orientation course for 10 days in the film school. They will teach you about sound and expose you to cinema, and expose you to everything, and based on that there are written exams and interviews, And once I was called in over there, I knew I can make it, because then when you are writing an exam, you are not an entity, you are not seen or you are not felt, or but when you are giving a course and an interview, you are face to face with people. So I knew I can convince people, whoever that is, about my background, and so I was quite sure I will get it. Yeah. The Hindi film industry might have been that, it was, unfortunately, it was just dialogue, music and some Foley, which, and it's a push-pull mix where, if there is dialogue, music will be taken down, and the moment dialogue is over, music will be pushed up, and if there are some actions, there will be some sound effects, this is how it was. But I wasn't part of that, I was brought up in Kerala, where there was a very aware film culture, and alternate films very strong. You can release an alternate film, or an art film, you can release that and it will survive, that's the background I have come from. And these films have really elaborate soundtrack. It wasn't like music and dialogues at all, it had in whatever capacity. They might not have enough money, but they have done elaborate sound, which even now we feel that wow, they have done that, they have done this. And there was no excess use of music in there at all, at that particular point of time, I would say. So I was quite unaware of that, and when we got into film school, we were shown world cinema. So which is again, and Indian cinema was just, of course it was there, but it wasn't the something that you are learning, the craft of making that Indian films, it was mostly like, it's about cinema, all over the world, whoever has excelled it, that's what we study. So it has no consequence of like, how Indian films are made, but of course Indian films are touched in terms of its creative aspects and things like that, and not like how elaborate it is or things like that, So for me, that kind of thing didn't happen at all. I mean, the question that you asked, that happened after I passed out from film school. Now where do you go? Because the world cinema is over, now it's a reality for you. So if you are coming to Bombay, in Bombay it's pilot dialogue tracks are like just pilot recorded and then it's dubbed, and is this what I wanted to get in? I was very clear, I don't want to get into I don't want to be part of a recording scenario where that's not contributing to cinema. And then why did I spend 3 years in the film school, so I was very clear, and that's why I'm where I am now, because I didn't get into the routine stuff. I came over, I joined a studio, a small studio for music recording and things like that. I did not see daylight. It was like 20 hours of work every day, and any kind of film or any kind of music I have to just record, and it's just whatever the studio takes up. I thought I'm going to kill myself, this is not what I wanted to do, and this is not why I joined FTI. So after 4 months or 5 months, I got suffocated and I got out of that, and then I thought I will get into location recordings, and a senior Vikram Joglekar gave me some work and his Clash, and that brought me into documentary scene, which I really wanted to. And everybody told me that there's nothing happening in terms of sound recording on location and things like that. So you have to join a music recording studio or a mixing room. This is what the happening thing for a sound man at that particular point of time. So I didn't want to get into that. So I got into this documentary or location sound recording or live sound for feature films. And that happens once in a while. There was hardly any money, all that sort, and there were not even equipment. Nagaras were there a little bit, but not really, nothing was meant for original sound recorded from location. So I thought I will pursue that, and everybody looked down upon me that I'm wasting my time kind of thing. Some of my seniors also told me, but I didn't leave it. I thought, let me see, and I pursued that. I really rigorously pursued that and pursued sync sound, in North Indian film industry, and really went for that and recorded lots of sounds from location. So luckily, when I kept doing these things, the foreign crew started calling me, because I was one of the few who were available here for original location recording. So that picked up, and then I became quite known for most of the and a favorite for most of the foreign productions, you know. And there was only one person that I remember who was Dilip Subramaniam, my senior. He was doing lots of things like that as well, and I did work with him as well. And Niyogi, there was another person, and I did work with them, you know, in the Clash and things like that a little bit. So I created a niche where I could survive, and documentary, and sometimes television was just stepping in, so some bit of television work. And mostly international documentaries, traveling around, and that needs a really high discipline and high quality, and I quickly picked that, you know, and that's what the background we had from Film Institute, the training. So that did very well and very well paid, and I was quite known. And that's when MTV was setting up in Singapore for India, and a Pan-Asia setup, and foreign directors would start coming in and directing programs, and naturally they chose me to record music on location and various interesting things. You know, in the early days of MTV they were doing a lot of interesting things. So the entire contract of MTV was given to me, and I had about 5-10 sound recordists under me, you know, I sourced equipment, so I would be on call 24/7, and many shoots, and I am controlling the whole thing, and multiple cameras and all kinds of things. So that way I got a lot of money, and I did that for 6 years as a freelancer, and simultaneously I was doing various documentaries that I wanted to do, you know. So with that I accumulated some money to build the studio. This is Fireflies, India's first sound design studio, and it was out of compulsion, because I realized when I was doing location sound, and when I am doing a feature film or any film documentary, I realized the editors never used to, because the editors would be doing track work, and they never use any of the sounds that we give, because they don't know where it is, nobody has really paid attention, and we are not there, kind of thing. So I felt it would be really great to have a sound design space where we can create with sound. You know, we record sounds on location lots, but nobody sees this, nobody hears this. It's just dumped somewhere, you know, because the editors can't. They need to hire equipment in Agra to play that, and then go through that. Going through that takes hours of this thing, and they don't know what we have provided. So generally, everybody sticks to what is essentially needed, which is dialogue. Or interviews, you know, from location, and only that is being used, you know. So when we see that, we realize that, you know, all that effort that we have taken on location, going around and recording very many things, in spite of recording and even logging on a paper, you know, on a cue sheet, it's not reaching anywhere. So then I looked at how does it work everywhere, how does it work elsewhere in the world, you know. So there people are sitting, sound people are sitting and doing the soundtrack work rather than the editors, you know. And because in here it's Steinbeck days, you know, so you have 4 tracks, you can lay 4 more tracks, you know, and most of the time it ends up that way, and physically you have to splice the tape and join things. So I thought it would be really nice to have a setup where we are playing around with sound, like creating sound, you know, or creative aspect of sound, and that's how I decided to open this studio. Everybody told me that, you know, like that I am crazy. You know, I mean, in India, in Indian films, there will always be music and dialogue. There will not be anything else, and this studio is going to go down. You know, before it's not even going to take off. So I had to, because there's a lot of money going in, and I had to really protect myself. So I just told everyone that I don't have a house. So the studio is my house, and I built a bathroom, toilet, everything, and I put windows. I insisted on windows in my studio, 2 big windows, because when I was working in a studio 15 to 20 hours a day, I felt so suffocating, you know, and I thought this is not the way to work. So when my acoustic engineer, acoustic designer, you know, when I brought him here, I said, look, these 2 windows are going to remain, you know, I have to have that. He said, oh, no way, we have to put bricks and block the whole thing. I said, it's either the window or you know, not both, if that is the case. So So he somehow accommodated the windows, and so I told everybody that this is going to be my living space, you know. So I am not looking at people hiring the studio; it's for my own work. So then I thought, you know, I will do documentaries or short fiction and things like that, or alternate fiction films in here, and I'll do my own work, and that way I can survive. So before moving to this place, it was in my bedroom, actually, my house. That's where we brought Pro Tools and we did Kumar Talkies. That was my first sound design work, sound recording and design work, and a partner of mine put money in to buy the equipment, and we set up things over there, and I learned on the job. I learned I didn't know anything about Pro Tools, so through manuals, I went through manuals and studied the software, and the director was with me. You know, we were literally together exploring things. Pankaj Rishikumar, and we worked 2 or 3 months, you know, learning on the job, you know, with a 4 GB hard drive. Yeah, so and with a U-matic machine, and you know, all Q-lock, the, you know, synchronizing between video and this thing. So film is telecined onto video, and locking that with a Pro Tools machine, you know, and that was really great. It was full fun, and absolutely creating with sounds. You know, this is what we were doing, and by the end of the film, we finished the film, and I won a national award for sound design and recording for that film. So that really gave a solid boost, you know, because it's like we were learning on the job, and then that's complimented nationally, which was quite something, you know, and. So I thought now I have to really, which means I could have proved that, you know, I can do things, I can create in sound, and I thought maybe I should move to a studio rather than, you know, in my bedroom. Though I've been doing films over there, but then eventually I shifted it to this place, you know. I joined a studio for 4 months, music recording and independent and small films and things like that. That studio had was attached to a transfer room, you know, the so-called transfer room. What is transfer room? Transfer room is where you transfer the typical cliche sound effects onto 35mm stripe. Okay. You know, so there is a library, you know, which is on spool on Nagra, to be played on Nagra, and somebody is going to transfer that onto stripe. So I used to hear when I'm not working or, you know, free time, you know, when I get out of the studio room, you know, I would hear like like that. It goes on for hours and hours. So I asked once, you know, what is this thing going on? So they said that's transferring fight, you know, like, so it's the same punch, you know, no difference, and nobody has any shame about saying that it's the same punch which is used 100 times, because that's how it's meant to be used. It's a number and it's a level, and so for 1 hour you will only hear dish dish dish. So somebody is transferring for 1 hour just that, you know, which imagine the number of punches that's there in the film, and then this will be taken away to the editing room on the Steenbeck. They will cut that physically and plant it, you know. Then, as you said, you know, a flight taking off, flight landing, like that, you know, few typical sounds, you know, so many number of times they will be transferring, and that will be laid, you know. So it shocked me the way you asked me. It shocked me too, that, you know, oh my God, is this the way it is? Because I wasn't part of that, you know, because coming from Film Institute, we don't have that kind of baggage at all, you know. We learned like elaborate nature of sound, you know, how to, or if we are not taught that way, we were taught mostly technicality of the how to deal with it, you know, how to record and all that sort, how to process and advanced recording technique and all that sort. But the way to use sound creatively, that we always did with the directors, and that is not something that was taught by the teachers, but we would see films and we would analyze and we would think that this is how we should be deciding or designing things, you know. So we have been doing elaborate work on that, you know. So in the Film Institute, anyway, there is no mainstream culture also, you know, particularly those period, you know, there was no culture of that sort. So everybody was looking at world cinema. So I also learned that way, and we were very much into creative use of sound, you know. After a couple of years of practical recording practicals, then you are getting into creativity. So when I heard this, it was quite a shocker for me, that what the hell is going on, I mean, like, how can anybody use this, But I realized this is what the industry is using here, and I wasn't part of the mainstream industry at all. On those days, I was mainly into documentaries and short films or fiction films, which are offbeat films, which are not mainstream films. So offbeat films never used this dish and all that sort ever, So we were in a better situation when I started with, I was never forced to get into that kind of thing at all. Much later, I think the studio was running for about 3-4 years. That's when 3 years, I would say. That's when mainstream films started coming in here, because they realized they have seen some of the work, some of the middle of the road films that had really good sound and that brought in a lot of interesting things and production value to the film. So this is how mainstream started coming in gradually, and then within few years it was like mainstream was coming here fully, and the studio was packed, with all sorts of films. So we were not doing just mainstream films, we were doing documentaries, fiction, offbeat films, and the mainstream films, it was like that. And the kind of mainstream film that came here, the directors wanted much elaborate work, on with sound, so that's the reason they were here. And most of the time directors were spending weeks and weeks here. So I never got into the culture of this music and dialogue and then few typical cliche sound effects. I wasn't part of that at all and never got into that. And even here we never had to, because we showed them what is possible. Why we should not use, even if you have fight, it doesn't have to be dish, same thing, and it can be very interestingly done. We showed that to them, and which was really interesting, and people started pouring in. And we could really take sound design, propagate sound design and take sound to a huge level, in the industry. And I would say in this film industry in Bombay, we have contributed. We've been pivotal in creating that culture of having sound design in Bollywood films, for sure, and for many years this was the only sound design studio where people would come and there would be serious sound work done in post production for films. I wanted to do something serious in sound, and the opportunity was documentaries, and documentaries involve travel. And for me, pursuit of my life, I consider is traveling, as a traveler, not a tourist. And so I'm sure that's one of the reasons that I embraced it instantly, and because most of the documentaries were funded from abroad, or crew is also from abroad. Many times they don't take a sound man from their country, because they wanted somebody in the crew, somebody who can understand the language and who knows the ways and things of the area. So it works well for them if they take me, if they take a sound man from here. So it gave me a lot of opportunities and a high discipline of work, and it's most of them are to be released internationally. So you have to deliver a quality which is what I studied and what I craved to do. So it gave me that kind of opportunity. So why not, And then docu-fictions as well, from documentary, foreign docu-fictions, I've been doing that. The speed of operation is one thing that is very important in documentary, and I was pretty good at that. I could really, I have been slim all my life, so I could really carry all this gear and run with the cameraman, with a small camera, anywhere, any which way. And I use my own boom, I am the boomman of my own this thing, and I was pretty good at that. I could hold the boom with a heavy windjammer, for 3 hours continuous, for documentaries and stuff like that. Sometimes there would be interviews which are like going on for an hour and a half, and the camera might not be rolling continuously. They will keep cutting it and restarting, but sound they wanted to run continuously, So, and they wouldn't want to distract the artist to know that the camera is cut. So I have to be performing with this boom and recording gear, and I was pretty good at that. Kumar Talkies was a complete film for me because I was asked to do the location sound and also design of the sound, so it's in its entirety, the whole sound aspect was given to me. And Pankaj was very forthcoming and ready to do anything. It's his first film, and to what extent we can create some wonders, he's in. So it was tough to record on location in Uttar Pradesh, and close to Jhansi we were shooting, and the usual thing, noisy atmosphere, traffic, but the whole idea was not to separate not to look at them as noise and get rid of them. I decided something else. I was exploring stereophony as well at that particular point of time, but generally I thought if noise is the character of a town, it's a town called Kalpi, and I thought the character should come through and the sound should be, these are not noises, these are sounds for me, these are source material for me. So I took seriously this whole noise thing, and I started recording whatever I can find in this cramped, cluttered town in the heat of summer, sweltering, and running around everywhere, getting various kinds of sound that I can, and I can pick from there, and also in the periphery of the town, and in the villages, and in the paddy fields, and all sorts of things. And I recorded the character of the town through sound. And one of the interesting sound was this, when you have those days when you have cinema being played in theaters, there will be somebody going with a megaphone or on a cycle, or a cycle rickshaw kind of thing, announcing, and which has lots of posters of the film, and you will be making these announcements, and like who is acting in that, and where the film is going to be shown, and various things. Really interesting announcements full of character. And our character, one of the character who is in the theater, who is working in the theater, whose job is to do this, and during just before the film starts, he will be at the counter giving the the tickets, selling the tickets. So he doubles up, other times he will be making these announcements, and during the film screening time he will be at the counter. So I was following him, and I was recording this announcement from very different spaces in the town and in the village. So I will be going ahead somewhere else, on top of a hill, or some valley or some paddy fields, and recording the sound that's coming through, traveling through various scapes, and the quality of that sound is beautiful, because it's reflecting from various realistic spaces, which are like a cramped town is like has so much of character, buildings all ugly and broken, half of them are like really not in place. So sound going through various things and through wind, so you hear this. So that really excited me to, I realized that you can really play around with perspective so much, and that gives really interesting aspect to sound and sound design, and I knew that I am going to do the post production, I am going to do the design, so I can really play around with this and place it where I feel right, So I recorded anything and everything possible, and I spent days and days in the cinema hall because these kind of screen, they are single screen, and people are like waiting for, this is the only entertainment, unlike there's hardly any television and stuff like that. So people would be thronging in, and they would be dancing, hooting, doing all kinds of things in the theater. And so recording people in the theater itself is quite something, So I spend days and days doing that, and then when there is a power breakdown, then there's such frustration, people would be jumping on the seats and hooting and creating such havoc, and then they pour out of the theater, and it's hot because you can't be in the theater anymore. So there talks and general talks, and how desperate they are to, they wait for the electricity to come back. So all this was part of the thing. Then in the projection room, old projection systems, how to change over from one projector to another, and how the projectionist becomes a creative cameraman and a sound designer by himself, because the projectionist will be ready with his zoom lens, and when there is a car chase happening, he will be zooming in with the lens, and he will switch on all the side speakers, so all of a sudden, in a car chase, you see car taking a turn and coming towards you, which wasn't like that in the film. And sound, all of a sudden all these side speakers are on, so audience literally jump and people think, wow, so projectionists become somebody who is very creative. When people go to cinema halls, knowing that, or this particular cinema hall, if you go, it would be really good, because projectionists will do lots of magic and increase the effectiveness of the film. So I recorded all the sounds of all this from various points, and then we brought all that to Bombay. Pankaj, working with Pankaj was like, there's nothing better than that, because he himself is the editor. So we will start doing sound design. Once you put the sounds, then your edits are going flying, and without that it was a little slow. So he would realize this, and he will just go back to his place. He is sitting with me during sound design. He will go back to his place and he will recut the sequence. He will elongate it, or add extra things so that I can put more sound. And even with the sound, it's not like pacing up so much. So he realized that the scope of length, with the sound, rather than without sound. And or he will think that certain, I still remember very clearly, projectionist was threading the film onto the projector, and that thing in silence or with the location sound, it didn't look very exciting, so he cut it short, like really. And when I started putting sounds over there, he ran back home and he made that sequence much longer, so that it is much more effective, and with the sound it's really holding. So that kind of things were happening back and forth. There was no ego, and 2 months he would be cooking food for me when I am doing design, and sitting next to me and commenting on things then and there. It was awesome. It's the ideal way of working and together, and I needed help because I did not know the software. So he will be reading out, and when we are stuck somewhere, we are together going through the manuals and stuff like that. So it was great fun, and I would say it was the best ever experience. Yeah. I would say the treatment of sound that we do in India is one thing in general, and what we get to see in Hollywood is one thing, and what we see in Europe, for instance, European cinema, or Far East, Japan, or Korean and Iranian films, Turkish films, and all that sort. I think that's an entirely different zone. And coming with the background of FTI, I would think we were tuned to world cinema much more than anything else. Because Hollywood has a certain kind of sound, of no doubt, but the way they use music and the proportion of music and sound, I would think even that there's a limitation in scope, and they are not exploring the full range of sound, I would think. And also, if you look at the layering of sounds and all that sort, it's more Hollywood is more like very pleasing for you, for a common audience, rather than going through its elaborate nature of things, unlike the world cinema, rest of the world, how, and particularly the Europeans, how they do sound for the films, French films, for instance, there's such elaborate nature of sound, and I don't think anybody anywhere in Hollywood, that kind of approach is there. Sometimes, rarely you see that, but Hollywood is mainly, it's a mainstream world cinema, like so, and the Europeans don't look at it that way, I feel, and their layerings and detailings are way sophisticated than Hollywood. That's how I look at it. And unfortunately, in India, it's it's not really explored much, not because there aren't enough people to do that. I mean that comes from a demand. It's a demand and supply. There's no demand, so the supply doesn't happen, so people just wrap that. So most of the people do the obvious kind of sound, which is the way we use music is like excess emotion, as if like a performance, as if the director is incapable of getting performance out of characters, and that you need strong support with music for people to get emotionally affected. Like if there's a sad sequence, as if the performers can't bring that out, and you need 100 violins to like really do that to get this. I mean, I don't know where this notion comes from, but culturally we want everything up front, and we are loud, and so loudness is all that matters. This is how we live around. If you look at the way people honk, the way announcements are there in railway stations or buses or in bus stations and things like that, it's like giving a slap onto your ear. This is how it is. So as if we don't have the culture of paying attention. That's how we lived, or we live. So cinema is just a reflection of that. If you look at the level of honking in this country, I've traveled so many countries in the world, very poor countries to first world and all that sort. Nowhere I've seen that kind of honking, for instance. So I don't know where it comes from. It's much more cultural than anything else, and it's not about functionality, because functionality wise, even if you go to Nepal, you don't hear like that, or Bangladesh, where there is lots of people living. So it's not about so many people are there. Sometimes people say there are so many people on the streets. If you don't honk, everybody is going to get killed. As if people don't get killed in this country on the road. I mean, we have the highest accidental death in the world, on the road. So it's not that. It's something about our attitude. So cinema is a reflection of all that. So we are always going really high levels of sound, and at the mixing stage, mixing engineers would keep the level so high, and the cinema halls will keep taking it down because the speakers are getting blown, and then the mixing engineers would say that, oh, then now the cinema hall is bringing it down, so we have to really pump it up, so they pump it up further, and the cinema halls takes it down further. So this is how it's going on here, and everything is about level. So sometimes, being a professional, I wonder, if we would ever be able to do something interesting with multiple layers and playing with silences and sound. Are we going to reach the mainstream, in that particular fashion? I have no clue if that would, because it's been a really frustrating professional scenario for us, where we are able to create, we are able to provide, but there is no taker, or if the director likes it, he would say that, he or she would say that, oh, when it's this is not going to appeal to people, or finally in the mixing room they would chicken out, and then they will say, let's pump up music and just play safe, So I've seen it like n number of times, So this has been our work ethics and work, I mean our not work ethics, sorry, this has been our approach towards work, and approach towards cinema, how it should be played in cinema hall, So so that has been quite difficult for all of us, and it brings you, it doesn't give you encouragement to do more and more interesting work, unlike everywhere else. So that makes the disparity between our kind of sound and the sound elsewhere, the contrast between that, or the gap between that is increasing and increasing and increasing, and I don't know where it is going. There used to be a time where people would from abroad would come here to do sound, and to do film post production. I don't think that's going to, it's not happening much now, and I don't think it's going to go way further, because you keep forgetting about subtleties. It's not that you have these ideas in your head that how detailed sound should be, the notion of sound work and sound design, and that's preserved somewhere. It doesn't work like that. You have to keep doing this, and you have to have opportunities. Then only you will improve your craft, you will refine your craft. Now at this point of time, if we don't do interesting work and if we keep doing mundane work, we are not going to reach anywhere. And the gap, as I said, the gap between international cinema, the approach towards that, and our approach, that's going to increase, you know. So which is a sad thing. We are trying our best to do detailed work, you know, whether it's used or not, whether it is eventually been, you know, brought down or removed, you know, whatever that is, you know, we are not looking at that. We are not looking at whether there is money, whether there is, all we ask is time. We ask the production that, you know, give us as much time so that we can do really elaborate work, you know. And unless we all team up and do elaborate work, you know, multi-layered work, polyphonic work, you know, it's not going to go somewhere, you know, because how long can you just play these levels, you know, loud level, the same thing, and when you are playing it to that loud level, all you hear is just one layer, you know, which can survive, which would be, you know, the graph, you know, the top layer, that's the only thing you hear. You know, nothing else has a place. And I wonder, when you have consistent loud sound, how is anything even going to be effective? Because unless you have silences and soft sounds and then the dynamics, you know, that takes you up and down, it's a contour, you know, it's like going up and down, that gives you the feel of sound and the effect, you know, that is desired, you know. So I hope things would get better. And so you asked me about is it because of the, you know, people or the technicians or, you know, engineers. I would think that, you know, we had a lot of focus in terms of recording techniques. You know, sound is seen as a technology oriented thing, and somehow technique is taught, you know, the technology is taught to you, not creative use of sound, you know. I don't buy that at all, you know. I have systematically, I was good at electronics and I was good at technicality of things. When big mixing console comes, you know, I knew each and every button when I was in the film institute. I was good at that. But then gradually I started unlearning that technology, or not like focusing on that, because when your technology sunk, what your thinking is very rational, you know. It doesn't go well with creative spaces, you know, or creating with sound. So I have been pushing myself away from technology, because you only need this technology to execute your creative desires, you know. And we have to start looking at sound technology as something that is just to attain a creative, interesting, incredibly interesting sound design, you know, which is like how to carve things, how to create things in sound, you know. And for that, in these days, technology is not something that you fiddle around all the time, because in these days, let's say when I was studying the Nagra, we need to know how to repair an Nagra, which is been taught to us, electronics, electromagnetism, you know, and electricity, various things have been taught to us to repair these machines. On location, if something breaks down, we were supposed to repair it. Now the situation has changed. None of these gadgets are user repairable, you know. It's meant to be sent to the company and they will do that. We are not supposed to. So actually we don't need to be stuck with this technology so much, you know. Rather, we should know the software, we should know the plugins, and we should focus on to creating things with sound, you know, and that should be the focus, and that has been my focus. So I am like trying as much, you know, trying to go away as much as possible from the nitty-gritties of technology, you know. And so if that is the approach, probably things would have been better in some sense, I feel. But overall, generally everybody is looking at clean sound, you know. When you are creating, that's not really your outlook, you know. If you have everything clean, that doesn't mean it's great design, you know.